Hey everyone, welcome back. In our last video, we did this nifty little break-even analysis for Nowlin Plastics. And in this video, we're going to move forward and tackle the next tab in our week 1 lab workbook. So in our next tab, Nowlin Financial, we've got 3 columns here. We've got a column for month, we've got a column for revenue, and we've got a column for cost. Each row, the first row of course is our labels, or headers, but after that each row corresponds to a specific month. So for here in row 6, we've got the month of May, where the revenue was $3,682,000 and our associated costs were $3,150,000. So you could tell I struggled a bit interpreting those numbers, so let's just start ourselves off with a little bit of formatting. I'm going to highlight both of these columns, and then once they're highlighted, anything that's highlighted, whatever change I apply will apply to those highlighted columns. So now that's looking a little bit easier and easier to interpret. And since our first column is our header, let's bold that. I'm going to just click on the number 1 to highlight the whole row, and then I'm going to click Command B. And now let's talk about what we're going to do. In this spreadsheet, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to calculate the profit for Nowlin, and we are also going to calculate the after-tax profit. So we'll get their profit and then figure out, once they pay taxes, how much of that will they actually get to keep? What will be their net profit? This word here, after-tax profit, is hanging off into column E, and profit and after-tax profit are both left aligned in their column, whereas month, revenue, and cost are centered. So I want to fix that for formatting. So I just want to make sure, first and foremost, that everything in row 1 is formatted the same. So I'll click on the 1 and highlight the whole row. And then I'll click center to make sure everything is centered. I clicked it the first time and it uncentered everything, so I'll have to click it a second time. And then I can either expand all of the rows so that there's room for this word after-tax profit, or I could wrap the text by clicking this A, B, C arrow flipper, or where it says wrap text when I highlight over it, when I hover over it. So there we go. I'm gonna leave it at that. And B and D are a little bit thinner. I'm sorry. If I could stop myself from being a formatting nutball, I would. Okay, I'm happy with this, and now that it looks good, I can think. Okay, we've got revenue and cost per month for a year. I've added a new column for profit where I want to calculate profit, and a new column for after-tax profit. Well, if I want after-tax profit, I need to know the tax rate. So let's come down here. I'm going to put it in row 16, and I'm going to call it tax rate. And I'm going to go to the cell next to it, and I'm going to type 0.3, because that's what's going to translate to 30% when I add the percentage formatting. So here is percentage formatting. It'll turn a decimal into a percent. Let me just show you a couple other ways to do percentages. You could type 30 and then the percent, shift 5. But you can't type 30 and then apply percent, because it'll give you 3,000%, because that's technically correct. So if you get it now, right? So either way, it's all the same, but you just have to enter it right so that you end up with 30%. Okay, let's do it. So profit, in this cell here, D2, is going to be equal to, and so to start any formula or ask Excel to calculate something, you always start with the equal sign. And equals, you could think of it as the way to instigate a command, but you could also think of it as a way to start a sentence, like D2 is equal to revenue minus cost, right? That's what profit's always going to be. And then our after-tax profit is going to be equal to our profit multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate. Okay. So we've done those 2 formulas and we've done some formatting, but what this video is really about is about what it means when we enter cell references And here where there's B2 and C2, those are examples of cell references. I haven't put numbers in, like I haven't typed in 3,459,000, right? What I've done is I've said B2. So whatever's in B2, if B2 changes, my profit calculation will change. If I go in and I erase what's in C2, it'll change my profit calculation. It's not connected to a number, it's connected to that cell. And then if I take a look at after-tax profit, it's connected to the profit for that year and the tax rate. So there's some, not all of these cell references are created equally. And let me explain. If I take my profit calculation, one Excel trick here, a thing that Excel does nicely, is that if you hover over that little circle square there, that's called the handle, and you click and you drag down, it will drag the formula down. So if I click in profit for October, it's giving us October's revenue minus its cost for a profit of $139,000. So every time I drag this formula from one cell to another, the cells that are referenced also move because they're referencing something relative to the position of the formula. So basically, it's not thinking of B4, it's thinking, 2 cells down, and it's not thinking of C4, it's thinking my next door neighbor. Well, that's all fine and good until we've got something like after-tax profit. Well, after-tax profit says it's my neighbor multiplied by 1 times the tax rate. See what happens if I were to try to drag this down. I'll just drag it down a couple spots. Notice here, it didn't work, right? It doesn't work. Why? Because it does my neighbor minus like some distant relative. It's not thinking that it's this tax rate. So I've got to tell it, after clearing out these 2 cells, I've got to tell it that no, it's not, just some distant neighbor from each cell. It's this tax rate every single time. And to do that, we use what's called an absolute reference. And to tell Excel that you don't want it to move relative to where you are, you don't want the cell reference to change, you need a $sign in front of the column to tell it you don't want it to move out of the column, and you need a $sign in front of the number to tell it you don't want to move it out of the row. You can enter the $signs each time, but please don't. Why? Because it takes so long, and it'll make it always harder for you to keep up, and it'll add time to the amount of time you need to be doing work. So if this is this is where I am. The cell says 146,300, but if I click on it, up here in the formula bar, I can see what's really in there. The cell reference to D2 multiplied by 1 times B16. Well, I'll click on B16 in the formula bar. And I will hit, because I'm on a Mac, I will hit Command T. Command and then T. If you're on a PC, you're going to use F4. If neither of those things work, you're probably on some sort of Hewlett-Packard, and you'll have to Google what it is. And it'll take you 2 minutes to Google, and it'll save you hassle every single time because it's actually hard to get in there and place those $signs. So B16. So how I actually would enter this if I was writing this formula is I would say equals to the profit, because I'm always going to want my next door neighbor calculated in the profit, multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate. And then before I even touch anything, I hit Command T and I close my parentheses. If you're working on a PC, you would say it's equal to your profit multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate, and you would hit F4 and close your parentheses. And then Excel, this is important because I obviously had a typo. We found a typo in your formula and tried to correct it to something. Do you want to accept this correction? I'm going to say no because I can tell here, you probably can't see that, but let's just say yes for a second and double check. And that's not right. What it did is it left out the parentheses. So just one more time for fun, equals my next door neighbor, profit multiplied by parentheses, 1 minus the tax rate, and then either F4 or Command T before closing your parentheses. And then a high value trick, if Excel ever had one, instead of clicking and dragging, I'm just going to highlight over that corner and I'm going to double click, and it will fill in everything till it stops. It'll go as far as the column goes, as far as that data goes. So the double click is a handy trick. And that's what we got. This is a lot easier than the previous tab, but we saw some profit calculations. We did quite a bit of formatting. We learned about wrapping text, and we learned about the difference between relative and absolute references. And I want you to know on your computer whether it's F4 or Command T, or if you're on an HP and you need to Google something else, like it could be Alt F4 or Shift F4 or something like that. I don't know what it is. Anyway, knock yourself out. I'm hoping you're having a great time following along, and I will see you next week.